Let's get it in. You do this back, made back, proof is back. Tell the whole world the truth is back.
Hi, I'm Billy Mays.
Where my hustlers, where my boosters at? I don't care what you do with stack. I know the world glued you back to the wall. You gotta run through that. I've been through that, been shot at, shoot that. Gotta keep a peace like a Buddhist. I ain't a new jack, nobody gon' Wesley snipe me. It's less than likely that I bring Jedi Knight. The more space I get, the better I write. Oh, never I write, but if ever I write, I need the space to say whatever.
And we are live from Salina. I'm James Lowe. Welcome to Community Access Television of Salina. If you're watching us in Saline County on Channel 21, thank you. If you're watching us on our website, salinatv.org, thank you as well. And tonight we have a gubernatorial candidate. Mr. Jim Barnett is joining us. We're going to go around the table, let everybody do their own introductions. Not because I feel like I'm going to miss anything, because I'm an idiot. So we'll start with Mr. Jim Barnett. Give us a brief introduction and tell us about yourself, my friend.
Thanks, James. Great to be with you. I practice medicine in Topeka, Kansas, but I'm really a farm kid at heart. I grew up on a farm near Redding, Kansas, which is by Emporia. Loved farming, but had asthma and hay fever and decided maybe I shouldn't farm. So the next best thing for me was practicing medicine. I've also been on the school board. Actually, that was my first entry into public service and my best time in public service, actually. Served on the Chamber of Commerce, have been in the Kansas Senate and served there for 10 years. I did run for governor once before. I won the Republican nomination in 2006, but I could not unseat someone named Kathleen Sebelius. And I'm back here today. Thank you.
Now, sitting next to Jim is our good buddy, Mr. Todd Pittenger.
Yes, Todd Pittenger, KSAL Radio, the Rockingham Media Group of radio stations. We have 29 radio stations across Kansas. I do news on the bulk of those radio stations, and I've met Dr. Barnett before. When Dr. Barnett was out at the airport, you had a tour around Kansas announcing your candidacy, so I know just a tiny little bit about you, just enough to be dangerous.
And sitting next to me, as only he can look, my broadcast colleague from the Sunday radio show on Radio Xenu, Mr. Derek Scaife.
And you said it all. That's
it.
You are the best dressed man on the panel.
Yes, you are.
Well,
I swear to
I disagree.
I swear to God, when he walked in tonight, I'm like, "What's that 20-year-old doing here?" But
I'm almost 40. Like I'm knocking on 40's door.
And sitting next to him is the inspiration for the movie Castaway, Mr. Gary Schwarzenegger.
Yes. My name is Gary Schwarzenegger. I, like Dr. Barnett, was born and raised on a small sharecrop family farm in Michigan, the bottom of the thumb, fertile land. We were poor, didn't know it, had a great life. It was an advantage. I remember, anyway, that's my heritage. Then I went off to study for some reason and studied in Goshen College 1 year in Indiana. And then at University of Iowa, and I was faculty at Iowa State University, taught human behavior, particularly like social psychology and the sociology of politics, philosophy, religion, and education. Wow. Those are my specialties. And it's good. Let's see. So then, yes, I moved, 30 years ago here already. Before that, went into the John Deere family farm equipment business with my father-in-law. He enticed me by saying, "I know you're good at education." He only had an 8th grade education, best psychologist I ever knew, next to my dad, who had a 3rd grade education. Here's the famous word, probably won't interest you, Gary, but just take a look at this material, and that's all they say. Or
you took the bait.
And it took us 3 years, so he showed me financial statements, and so I was in the business with him. Then we sold that, built a big new store, and so on. Moved here and bought a couple insurance agencies and a horse ranch, and I like politics almost as much as I do eating great food and talking a lot.
Now, I want to start with our guest. Dr. Barnett, obviously you're a doctor. What do you make of the healthcare situation and everything just across Kansas in general?
It's just a huge issue. We just actually finished a 2-day tour in southeast Kansas. The tour was to support our hospitals, to keep our hospitals open, and to make sure we had health access available. The issue that is, I think, most pertinent is Medicaid expansion and then also CanCare. I would make it clear up front, I support Medicaid expansion. It's a program with plenty of problems, but a lot of people have been caught in an intersection with higher and higher healthcare costs and wages that just haven't caught up.
Yeah.
And what happens is people then don't have access to care. They come in way too late, where it's in the emergency room, very costly, and too late in the process. Independence, Kansas lost their hospital. Can you imagine what Salina would deal with, how it would be in Salina if you lost your hospital, if you're trying to grow economically? It's like losing your school.
Yeah.
So I very much want to support that. CanCare is the other program that's been problematic in Kansas in terms of poor satisfaction with patients, hospitals that can't get their dollars when they've provided services, and when the dollars do come, they're very low. So CanCare is also another area where we've got to make major strides and improvement. Last but not least, if the state of Kansas receives a block grant under the Medicaid proposals that have been discussed in Washington with the Congress and President Trump, the next governor of Kansas really needs to have an understanding and passion for healthcare and healthcare reform, because we're going to be given the opportunity then to innovate. So I think it's really important that there's a medical background for the next governor.
Yep.
Now,
Very good.
Todd, you've covered the doctor.
A little bit, yes.
You've also covered some of the other candidates. Start us off here. And
You mentioned, I heard you mention education there just briefly, about how devastating, you equated the shutting down of the hospital to shutting down of a school here in Salina. I had a story just the other day, start of the new school year, statewide, 1,500 teachers. There's 1,500 openings for teachers right now in Kansas. What can we do to get education back on track in Kansas?
We have workforce shortages across the board. Education is just one example. And when I've been to Salina and have visited with other people here in terms of visiting with Tim Rogers out at the Airport Authority and with your chamber leadership too, 1,000 open jobs right now. I was in Salina just 2 nights ago, Tuesday, with the Farm Bureau meeting. Again, the discussion of open jobs, particularly to education. We need to adequately fund education.
Is it adequately funded now, do you think?
I don't think it has been. I can't speak for the courts, but I don't think it has been. We also need to stay out of the courts. We should have decisions made by families and parents and educators and local school boards, and not made in the courts. We get there by adequately funding on a regular basis education. So if we want to have the best teachers teaching our children, then we need to pay them accordingly. It's the same thing with the correction officers. Look what's happened in El Dorado.
It's horrible. Yes.
It's horrible. So the next governor needs to lead on that issue. There are lots of opportunities to improve in education, and I look forward to doing that. But we have to partner with education. We can't get there by fighting. We've got to partner.
Let's see, we've talked education, we've talked prisons a little bit, and we've talked healthcare. I think we're done.
There we go.
now,
If it was only that simple.
it was only that simple. Now, Derek, you go up the highways and byways. You're like a man of the people. You know all sorts of different people from all sorts of walks of life. You know, Mr. Barnett is essentially running for governor, going to run the state that you're living in. I know you've probably got some questions.
Actually, me and him had a brief discussion before, and some that he said, and I would like the people to know where your thoughts is and what you're making plans to go towards. When you told me like the instance in Coffeyville, as far as education and how to actually get things to move towards a better way. So I mean, yeah, we touch schools, we touch prison, and all these things, and we touch education, we touch Medicare, but I would like you to let them know, where does it start? Like when you had that discussion, it was as to help the reform towards prisons and kids going through this way. It starts where?
Well, Derek, great question. I've been asked this vexing question before. How do we break what appears to be a generational issue with failure of families, with issues with mental illness, with issues with addiction. And honestly, I've been dealing with this for 35 years practicing medicine. I see it over and over again. And it comes out in terms of mental health, of poverty, of addiction, of cancer, of difficulty with diabetes. How do we change that pattern? Because when it's late in life, you never want to give up on anyone, but it's almost too late too many of the times. It has to go back to those very early childhood years. And when I understand and talk with patients in detail, it's some toxic event that occurred very early in life. It may have been molestation. It may have been physical abuse or emotional abuse. It may have been parents not there, or parents not reading to them, not talking to them, not helping them learn how to control behavior. So if we're going to break that pattern and really make a difference long term with education, prisons, et cetera, it has to go back to very early childhood experiences. We have to intervene at that early stage, or we're all going to pay and pay and pay later. So I'll give you an example of what's going on now. We were just down in Coffeyville for the Keep Your Hospital Open tour, but we also met with the superintendent of the schools. They have kneaded and threaded programs together like Head Start and others. They didn't need any extra money, but they needed the leadership and focus on early childhood intervention, getting children in so they have a high quality experience with someone reading and talking with them and teaching them proper behavior. That's how you make the difference and break that cycle. They're also doing this really neat thing by getting their parent or parents involved and giving them a scholarship to get them into community college, so it's become a 2-generational effort. And as governor, I very much want to lead on that issue because I think that's how we make a huge difference across the state, changing lives and for workforce development too. I'm going to segue just a little bit, but in education there are many other opportunities for reform. I'll just give you an example. I was visiting with a business person in Kansas City who was struggling to get the kind of employees that they needed for high-tech jobs. And he said, you know, we really ought to be teaching coding in 2nd grade and it should be fun. Now, I heard that, and as a medical person, I thought, is that coding for billing for the office work? I said, no, it's computer coding. You get it, thank you. And he's right, but we're not doing that, really. And then I visited with the superintendent of schools in Junction City, Corbin DeWitt, and their teachers were trying to develop an electronic portfolio for their graduating seniors, and they were having trouble making that portfolio for the students. A senior said, I'll write an app for it. A senior in high school wrote an app for it. So we not only should be teaching coding early, but our seniors ought to be able to write an app before they graduate. And we can achieve that. There are many other opportunities, and that's not the answer to everything. But the next governor has an opportunity to work with educators and parents and lead on that issue. So thanks for that opportunity.
That was a perfect answer.
Yeah, good.
He's got your vote.
Yeah, you got my
That was a great question.
Now, Gary, all the years that we did sample text together, and you would get some of these politicians, you would ask them just the simplest question. They had no clue how to answer it. Over the years, you've gotten better.
No more simple questions?
No more simple questions. What do you have for the doctor this evening to start us off?
I think you actually enjoy this. You covered your 2006 election, and I will start with the current election. Would you name your primary opponents, the other Republicans? And then, with a very short review, suggest the single most important thing with which you disagree about each of them, just one item, and the single most important thing with which you agree about each one of them. And then, I don't know how long we'll have time for questions. Let's just do that one for now. That's a pretty simple question.
It is.
And it can be quite revealing, yeah.
Yes, it is. And if I may, I might just start from a broad perspective of how I agree or disagree with Governor Brownback.
All right.
Because it all sort of plays into that, so
Yep.
the answers, I think,
That-
will come
that
into
will
that.
work.
First of all, one thing I really liked what Governor Brownback did was Senate Bill 155, which was our technical education bill that recognizes that college is not for everyone, that we need to have students coming out of high school into technical training for a lot of those skilled jobs that pay well and go that route if they want, instead of getting a 4-year degree with $100,000 of debt and not being able to get a job. And it's actually not a 4-year degree. I met with the now chairman of the Board of Regents, and he asked this question: Jim, how long do you think it takes for an average college student in Kansas to get a 4-year degree? It's 6.2 years. So think about that in terms of cost. So I agree with Senate Bill 155. Where do I disagree? In the broadest perspective, Governor Brownback gave us a tax experiment, which I disagree with the tax experiment, but he has been the first governor we've had in many governors who said it's my way or the highway. There was inflexibility and an ideology that said it's either my way or no way else. That is not how we lead. That's not how we bring people together to unite and come together and focus on what I'm calling a One Kansas agenda. So that's a broad answer to your question. Now, the other announced candidates, Chris Kobach, Jeff Collier, Lieutenant Governor Jeff Collier, Ken Seltzer, Insurance Commissioner, Wink Hartman out of Wichita. There's another gentleman by the name of Kucera, and I don't know how to pronounce his name, a Leawood businessman.
Kucera.
So I'm not going to be able to give you details on everything, for instance, that they might agree on. So with Chris Kobach, let's start there. You asked for some sense of agreement. I'll give you 2 areas of agreement. I think we need to have elections that are trustworthy, and I think we need to recognize we live in a country of law where we're governed by the rule of law, and that includes the issue of immigration. Having said that, I think the whole idea that voter fraud is a major issue for the state of Kansas, I think is wrong. It's actually, I believe, a minor issue, but it's made into something that heats a lot of people up and distracts a lot of people from the real issues that are facing us. So I again qualify that we want safe elections. Frankly, I'm concerned about the safety of our elections with electronic voting right now, and am in favor of paper ballots until we get that sorted out when you think of what's happened with Russia. On the issue of immigration, he is also saying that is the most bothersome issue for our state in terms of our economy. Not true. If we follow that hot rhetoric, we're going to kill our state's economy because we rely a lot on migrant labor, legal migrant labor, by the way. So those are a couple of examples. I can go further with that. But
that's good.
Let's go to Jeff Collier. Jeff Collier, I'm going to struggle a little bit there. I like the idea of innovation in healthcare, but the innovation I've seen has not been positive in the experience and what the actual objective studies show. But the need for healthcare reform would be a common area of recognition.
Yeah.
Now, he's been the first officer for Governor Brownback for now 6.5, going on 7 years, the architect of an extremely destructive tax plan for our state, where taxes were zeroed out for over 300,000 Kansans, and then what happened is precipitously a $700 million drop in revenue that occurred year after year without adjustments. And it has almost brought our state to its knees. And if we elect that kind of governor again, or the wrong kind of governor again, we'll be face down on the cement. So we cannot continue with that kind of leadership that was blinded to the impact. It's hurt our state in multiple ways, whether it be our programs for education or for funding for KDOT. It really, really brought us down to our knees, and we can't have that. Ken Seltzer and Wink Hartman, as I look at them on their websites or listen or read their public comments, they also seem to kind of follow the same type of thinking as I see with Governor Brownback. Their approach is shrink government, lower taxes is going to solve everything. We've got to invest in Kansas now. We are in trouble. We've got to invest in education and highways and so forth. And this new tax plan that the legislature passed, overriding Governor Brownback's veto, they did the right thing. They created a new economic foundation. Now, I applaud them for what they did. It was a courageous vote because they're going to get clobbered next election cycle. But they did what they had to do. And what we want are elected officials who will do what's needed for the people not for their next election, and
Yeah.
that's why I applaud them. So I would have to lump all of them in that same category, where I think they're still talking that same language of lower taxes, and what they did in Topeka was wrong. I think what they did in Topeka was right. So I can go on, but
That's
respecting
good.
time, is that good enough?
That's real good. And by the way, Jim Ward, Democrat Minority Leader in the House, and our own Stephen Johnson here, were the ones that brought that thing to fruition. And I really like to see that collaboration right there.
Absolutely,
So-
and I applaud
so
Jim Ward and Steve Johnson.
I
Applaud them
really
both.
like your comments, by the way, and for the record, I think I'm a Democrat.
Last I checked, you were a Democrat.
Really good answer.
Now,
Thank you.
you brought up, Dr. Barnett, you brought up Brownback and everything. This budget hole that we seem to be in, how does the state of Kansas dig out of that?
It's going to take a long time. Just so you know, our budget deficit, long-term debt for the state, just in terms of bonded indebtedness, is $5 billion.
Yeah.
It is going to take us years to get out of that. That's why if somebody tells you that we're going to get out of our mess by cutting taxes, they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes.
Yeah.
It is just absolutely not true. So we have a new economic foundation. We're still going to have to be very careful with our expenditures, very cautious, very careful that we're spending our dollars wisely to get through these lean years. But the long-term answer is only through economic growth. And unless we can figure out how this state can grow its economy, we're never going to get out of that hole, which will take a decade or more to get out.
Yeah.
Just one little diversion here. Highways, we normally spend a couple hundred million a year to maintain highways. We're going to spend like 30-some million this next year. Our highways are going to deteriorate eventually. It's just going to fall off rapidly. So they're going to bond $200 million a year for the next 2 years to maintain highways.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to bond that money over long term. The first 20 years, it's interest only. 20 years of interest only bonds. Now, those roads will be deteriorated again by the time that's over. So our kids and grandkids are going to be paying just on interest-only bonds for 20 years before the principal is started to be paid off. They did that because our general budget is so bad. We're so bad with our budgeting from Brownback and Collier, they couldn't even afford bonds where they paid principal. That's how bad we are. Now, when I started thinking about running for governor, I met with a guy named Mark Tallman, who's from the School Board Association. He said, Jim, you're right, we've got to fund schools, fix our roads, shore up capers, expand Medicaid, but he said the next governor has to figure out how we're going to grow our economy. And Kansas is behind. We've lost private sector jobs. We're not keeping up with our partners. So the next governor has to focus on that. What do businesses want? They want workforce development, education for families, health care for families, infrastructure, quality of life issues. We let all that go, putting all our eggs in that one basket of no taxes for $300,000. We've got to then partner business with education. And you're doing that in Salina, and it's being done across the state, but we need to do that much better. And we're behind. How we're educating children is probably 10 years behind in terms of what they need to have to go out and get a job and fill the needs we want. And Kansas can grow. Local chambers of commerce, like in Salina and others, have done a tremendous job with the absence of the state. Think of what we could do with, say, your Salina Economic Development crew, your Salina Chamber, what they're doing. Think of what more we could do if you had a functional governor, a functional office of the governor to wrap around that and support it. We could grow a whole bunch more. That's the long-term answer right there.
Now, Todd, listening to all the questions and his answers and everything, I know you've got some questions.
You mentioned cooperation, both sides of the aisle. I think with Governor Brownback, there was no in between. People either liked him or they didn't like him. There was no in between. In this current political climate we're in, is it possible for one person to go in and be able to work with both sides?
Let's hope so, because that's the only way we're going to solve our problems. As I travel the state for a year asking people what they wanted in their next governor, what direction would they like the state go, there were certain words I heard over and over again. The first word was one, the second word was unite, the third two words, work together. And we were driving around, I said, you know, the theme of our campaign is going to be one Kansas, because only when we work together and develop and unite as one Kansas will we solve our problems. So I've heard it over and over again. I will work with Republicans, Democrats, independents, if they're there, I don't care who they are. I just want to solve problems. And I think that's what voters are ready for. They want somebody who's going to be governor who will say, let's use some common sense and work together and solve problems and make government work again for the people of Kansas.
That is the perfect answer, because that is what I hear from my walk of life. That's what I hear a lot. People, they say, why has it got to be Republican? Why has it got to be Democrat? Why they got to be this? Why they got to be that? Why can't they work together? Because at any situation, if you're not, for example, if you married and your wife is spending all the money, but you spending all the money, but she's trying to save money, where are you gonna ever get? Where are you gonna ever get? Because you're not working together.
That's right. That's right.
So that was a perfect answer.
We can't solve our problems by fighting with each other. We've got to work together. Thank you.
That is very true.
Now, Gary, sitting here and listening to all this, are you going to have him do acrobatics next?
No, I tell you,
What's the next chunk of goodness do you have
Well,
for us?
just for what it's worth, some of us, including me, helped elect some moderate Republicans in this county because we thought it was important. And I won't name names, but we felt we are in a somewhat obviously better situation than we were the last election cycle. Now, I got chewed out by this Democrat state people for assisting a certain Republican, and we all knew his opponent was needing to be gone. So we kind of managed that by cooperating. I mean, we really managed it. And so we got that particular person removed, and the replacement has been doing a stellar job, and that's also part of why things have moved as they have moved. So with that in mind, let's move now just to the second phase. Name your opponents. I'm really hoping and wishing for you that you will win the general election, because and I really think you're going to have the best wishes of the bulk of the moderate Republicans, moderate Democrats on your side, because you have a good tag on it. So let's move to through your primary, and let's just say that you're going to be the Republican candidate. So name your potential Democrat opponents, and the same question, the one single thing that you most agree with each of them, and the single most important thing with which you disagree. And then just to toss it in, the same question for our current president, Donald Trump, because I may not get a chance to ask another question. So the single most important with which you agree, and I know you know all the candidates, and we've
had two.
Yeah,
we've had potentially. We've had Carl Brewer on the show, and we had
Jim Ward. Now Jim is not officially in.
Jim's not officially in,
Yeah.
but didn't he hire a treasury person today?
I think he'll
somewhere.
roll in, and it's good for Democrats to have primaries. Democrats have been kind of fearful of primaries, and I think you need the exposure. But anyway, those two simple agrees, disagrees with, and then perhaps which one would you prefer running against in the general election?
All right, thanks very much. Well, first of all, I want to talk a little bit about labels. I think labels can be very destructive, very distracting, and take people away from the issues, which I think that's what matters most, is the matter of what's a good policy, what are the important issues for the people of Kansas. I think I represent the values of most Kansans. That's how I like to label myself. And I just wanted to make that comment publicly here so that's known to all of you and the listeners as well. And I love Kansas. I think this is such a solid state, and there's so many good people in this state. So that's why I'm comfortable saying that. The Democratic opponents, the Democratic nominees, let's say, that are up for consideration, I have not met with all of them personally. I've looked at their information online, and yet sometimes that's really not entirely clear what their positions are. So having not heard them, I don't want to misstate anyone else's position. In terms of areas where I think I would probably agree with all of them most, it's going to be on Medicaid expansion, and that I think is probably the safest thing to say. I believe they all support that, and you please correct me if I'm wrong.
They do.
But I think that's the right policy. I do.
That's very encouraging. I'm very, that doesn't surprise me because as you worked up to this, that's why I already know, because I've studied all the other candidates in the primary, some of whom I know quite well, and I'm just telling you, you're my odds-on favorite to emerge from a Republican. So that's the thing you most likely agree on. Yeah.
Okay.
And then maybe one thing that you most likely would disagree.
And I'm going to qualify this by saying they're not here and I haven't listened. But as I've traveled the state, talking, for instance, last month we traveled the state doing a livestock and ag industry listening tour.
Yeah,
it was really
followed
fun.
that a little bit.
Oh, it was really fun.
Yeah.
I just had so much fun doing that. Traveling and driving through feed yards, feed lots, and talking to managers and seeing what they're doing. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
They're incredibly bright people and just was so much pride in their operations. And then this last week we were on the healthcare tour in Southeast Kansas. We also segued into education down there as well. But one of the things I heard over and over again from everybody was the onerous regulations that we deal with. Whether it be someone who's trying to expand their feed yard by 10,000 head, and they're having to wait 8 or 9 months to get a permit in order to expand.
And I'm aware of that.
And we're holding up progress. We're holding up economic growth. The example of healthcare I can talk over and over again about the over-regulated issue we have and how difficult it is for me just to start and talk to a patient and look them in the eye and ask them about their conditions and their symptoms. I'm clicking on so many things on my computer to get that out of the way before I can even start my office visit. It's sometimes several minutes before I can get there. And then the wrap-up is worse too in terms of all the things we're required to do. In the area of education, we're talking about early childhood learning experiences. They're regulated such that it takes almost a gymnast to get through all the hoops to get that set up. Good-minded people wanting to do the right things with early childhood ed, but trying to combine all these programs and getting a fire inspection. Because of 2 different programs being combined, the fire inspection had to be done twice by the same person. How stupid is that,
I didn't know that.
So the regulatory environment, I think for me is something that I will definitely want to work on across the board. So that those are maybe my best
That's
answers
good.
for you.
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
President Trump. I think you want to talk about President Trump.
We can do that real quick. And everybody is wondering.
Well, it's a real head scratcher for me. I love the idea that President Trump gave a voice to people who felt like they didn't have a voice. And I can tell you that in talking to people almost daily, and I called someone up yesterday that just went to our website and wanted to talk about issues. I could tell that his heart was in the right place, but he just felt ignored. He felt like government wasn't working for him. He felt like big money was really all that mattered. And he felt that President Trump, rightly or wrongfully, gave him that voice. So I think the voice is what I want to focus on. Now, you ask about things that I would disagree on.
Or the one most important one.
There are a lot of things that I have questions about. I think the jury is still out, and that's why I described it as a head scratcher.
Yeah.
But I think I'll again focus on this one very important issue that matters so much to Kansans. So let's talk about what matters
that's
to
good.
Kansans. It's health care.
Yep.
It's throwing out the baby, throwing everything out and not having anything there to replace it with. So if they want to repeal that's okay if they've got something better to replace it with. Yeah. And yet I see a great danger. We've got to have other areas of reform, and I'd love to talk about that tonight if you want to, about how we could reform healthcare in a very positive way for everyone in terms of cost and access and quality. But that would be my issue. We would do great damage if we don't have something better to replace it with. Does that help answer your question?
You're
Okay.
right on target for me, and I would guess a number of people.
Probably a number of
enjoyed-
people, because what you just said about the health care, I mean, some people can barely even afford to pay their bills.
I know.
So how can we afford to pay for health care or be forced to pay for hair care or this, that, and the other when we can't even pay? You can't even pay your mortgage. You can't even pay your lights. You can't even pay your gas.
I think you're probably more qualified than a lot of people to tell us about this, because you're a doctor and you see it from both sides. You see it as having to have your own health care for your staff, but then I see you probably see the struggles of with the patients who come to see you as well.
Yeah. So how is that? How can we? How you say we can go about that? You can tell us about that. How will we go about that?
You know, I see it every day, over and over again, so I love to talk about the subject. And so let's look short-term and long-term both. So short-term, we should expand Medicaid because of so many families who can't afford, people who work, families that work, 2 jobs, they still can't afford it. And by the way, if you look at one of the leading cause, if not leading cause of bankruptcy for a lot of families is health care bills. It may be $15,000 and they're bankrupt over that. So I believe anything we can do to increase access short term is a good thing for us to do as a state. And it's part of economic development. It's part of keeping our state alive all across the state, okay? Another part of that is supporting our federally qualified health clinics. These are beautiful programs that we have across Kansas. And for those that aren't insured, they can get access to care in an affordable way through these clinics. So that's another thing I really supported very strongly. But long term is really what we need to focus on. So right now, we pay for a whole lot of expensive tests, expensive procedures, shiny buildings that we want to keep full that cost a lot of money. We've been doing this decade after decade after decade. Our healthcare costs 17% of our GDP, growing every year. It's not sustainable. It's not affordable. The federal government gets this. We're spending more on Medicare and Medicaid than Social Security right now. They know that we've got to switch this. We've got to flip the switch. So what's the flip? Here's the flip. We need to pay doctors, hospitals, insurance companies, we'll kind of lump them all together. We need to pay a certain amount of money a year and say, here's this amount of money. Let's say it may be $14,000 for you, and it might be $9,000 for you, and $11,000 for you, okay? Just picking random.
Well, Todd's got the cash. You know, Rockingham Media pays him a pretty good chunk of change, so he's got it. So
this is called value-based purchasing.
Yes.
We're going to pay
Yes.
that amount, and then all of a sudden, the focus on providers is to keep people well. We're going
That's
to
it.
keep people healthy, keep people out of the hospital. If there's an issue where someone can't afford their medicine, which I also see over and over again, just simple things now like insulins that cost outrageous, inhalers for asthma. I can go on and on. Generics no longer are affordable for so many people. Yeah. That's another issue we can talk about later, but that's a federal issue. But so the focus is paying for health. Keeping people healthy and out of the hospital. Once we start that and flip the switch, then we're going to see better quality and much more affordable care. Now, Mayo Clinic gets this right now. Mayo Clinic is already recognizing that they can't keep their hospital full to the max. They can't keep people in their hospital for a week, 10 days, 2 weeks. They need to do their work at Mayo Clinic, and then they're partnering with community hospitals around and getting that patient back to the community hospital with 24/7 e-medicine or telemedicine. And that gets the right care, the best quality care, but it gets them back to the community where hospitals can then stay open. We need that. That's one of the reasons Jim Barnett is saying, I support hospitals staying open. I support Medicaid expansion to keep them open. That's the kind of switch we have to make. If we get a Medicaid block grant, you now know what the first thing I'll be looking at is innovation, true innovation in Kansas to help us do better with healthcare, not what we've seen, which has really not been a success.
I think that would I think that would be great towards people that can't do it. That's a good plan.
Because even our county commissioners, which at the time were all Republican, went on record saying it was not appropriate, and they collaborated with all the county commissioners all over the state. You probably remember this, Don. And they made the statement, signed a document and everything, losing nearly, nine, let's see, it actually was almost, it was $900 billion is what
Wow.
Kansas lost. And they went on record saying, we should not do this. And the legislature at that time passed it through anyway. And it does cost, I know that it's more now than $4 trillion to execute our national health care plan. That's how much money is spent, and that's about a perfect replication of what it costs to educate. So $4 trillion, and missing that much money out of what Medicare really stunted the hospital, the healthcare delivery system in this. So the governor and the legislators at that time, and after this last election, he had 18 fewer people that were puppets on his strings, and that's why things went the way they finally went, and that took a long time to get done. So you're really on target now. Now, among the things you and the Democrats will agree on, that's why I think it'll be a terrific general election, and I think the cream has risen to the top.
Well, thank you. The challenge is
Yeah.
to get through the Republican primary for
Yeah,
me. That is
it
a
is.
challenge.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
just hoping there are enough people who
Well-
want to, they see the need to pivot.
Yeah.
I think the next governor of Kansas may well be a one-term governor. And I'm okay with that,
Yeah,
but we
just-
have to
just
pivot.
get things rolling.
And there's so many hard decisions that have to be made.
Yeah.
So we can't have a governor who really wants to be president.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
somebody that I think is that way, maybe more than one.
I think
We've
you're
got to have a
correct.
governor that wants to work for Kansas. And, I'm 63. I could retire now. I don't want to. I still love practicing medicine. But I could retire now. I'm ready personally, professionally, financially, I could do that. But I don't want to, and I want to run for governor because I know how important this is for our state. And I can lose this election. I'm willing to lose it. I just want to be on the right side of the issues. And I'll be okay if I lose
Yeah.
if I'm on the right side of the issues. I'm okay with that. I can be at peace with that.
And a full bore campaign is just like getting a master's degree in education and how the political system works. And I mean, part of it is the educating people that, the younger generation. Most people, out of 100, I'm sure you know this, out of 100 people that vote all the time in Kansas or anywhere in the country, what would you guess? Let's just take a quick guess. How many know the issues well? Start with you, Todd. Out of 100 people, that vote all the time,
How many know the issues well?
How many know the issues well? That's the key.
51.
Okay, what would you say, Doctor?
Well, I don't know the number. I'm going to guess less than 50%.
Yeah, same thing.
I'm gonna say
40s.
I'm gonna say 25, 35.
You're the closest. You know what it is? 5.
5.
Oh, good Lord.
Know the issues well, and one of my sociological perspectives is, like I said, politics, philosophy, religion, education, and that's what it is. And that doesn't mean people are bad, dumb, ignorant, whatever. It's just that the younger generation, very busy. They don't have time to pay attention as much as I do.
I wouldn't say that they don't have
Well,
time to pay
they
attention.
don't-
They just don't care to.
Well, that's a combination of
And that's just our education.
I think people are, with the economy, on an upswing in the whole country, but you can't call people, you kind of want to say not only are you ignorant, which means you ignore the facts, but you haven't taken time to learn them, but you're dumb
But
and
you're dumb,
stupid.
yeah.
And that you can't say
But you
that
can't
about
say
those
that,
people.
you can't.
Absolutely not, because they don't intend to not know the issues well.
They're not
I think most of them.
educated. They're
That's
just
right.
not educated.
So,
How do you reach those
So the campaign is very important arm of education. It's terribly important.
Well, thank you for the
Just
question.
what you've been doing tonight, and you've
And-
been doing a stellar job.
And the comments. First of all, we are running an unconventional campaign. First of all, you see people announcing appointing treasurers, and their purpose is to go raise money.
Yeah.
We're not out beating the bushes to raise money. We're not going to do that. All the consultants would tell me that's what I should be doing, and I'm doing this wrong, but I'm not.
We actually, and in the interest of fairness there in what you mentioned, we actually had someone who was going to be on the show one night. They blew the show off at last minute because they had to go get a check from somebody. Okay. So, you're.
That is
The other,
Yeah.
sad. That's very sad.
So we're traveling the state, talking with people, meeting with people, listening, and talking about specific issues. Another thing that's unique to our campaign, we have a staff of 8, and they're all college students. Everyone is a college student. And
And that's a little behind the scenes that I know about your campaign. I just find that phenomenal. Yeah.
Well, it's wonderful. We love it. And of course, they challenge us, a lot of energy, a lot of brightness.
Yeah.
But we think that the future of Kansas we have to look for the future of Kansas at our young people, because we're losing left and right our young people.
Mm-hmm.
Unless Kansas changes so that we can attract and retain young people in this state, we're in serious trouble, because we're all going to quit working someday.
Hey, we're all of us are getting close to over the hill.
You're not that.
40, almost 40.
So one of the focuses of our campaign is going to be that very issue: is how do we change things in Kansas so this is a state where people want to come and live. And I have a really optimistic look at young people. One of the ways we reach people is this tonight, thank you, but another way is through driving the state in our truck, thank you, and another way is social media.
Yep.
And so we're
and you are, and I don't mean to do the old professional wrestling thing and put you over, but the social media that you guys are doing is absolutely amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I just, whoever is running that, you need to double whatever you're paying them. Because,
And I could tell you from experience, he's not just putting you over. I want to put people over all the time.
Well, I'll be very honest. I didn't do Facebook or Twitter until just a couple months ago, okay?
Well, good
But
for you.
it is a joy. And if you would go to barnettforkansas.com and click on the Facebook icon, and it won't hurt you to do that, and it doesn't make you have to sign up. They're a little bit timid to do that.
Yes.
But you'll find where we've been, what we're doing, and where we're going in the future as well. So we really encourage that. I also want to share that I just started tweeting last week. Now, I'm not tweeting in the middle of the night. I have made no tweets about nuclear bombs or anything like that. But I will tweet about this tonight, and it's really kind of fun to do that. So I invite people to follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
That's good.
Now, usually on our Live from Salina show, we are always joined by our rabble-rousing ringleader, Ross Long from Colorado, and he couldn't be here this evening via the old Skype-a-rooney. So I have to ask the question that he asks all the candidates.
Oh, there you go.
And that
You
is
can probably guess what this is.
you probably know what's coming. What do you do with the fact that Colorado makes a lot of money off pot? What do you make of Kansas, either with legalizing it or doing something with hemp, which is a completely other issue? Where do you come down on that?
And as a doctor, medical marijuana,
Yes.
is that something that...
There we go. Oh, snap-a-doodle.
It's a good topic, though.
It is.
All these easy questions. Really, what a fun evening.
That's why we got Gary.
Yes. Well, let's address those individually. And I think I heard legalizing marijuana, medical marijuana, and hemp. I think are the big three. So the clear approach that I will take with any legislation that is sent to me on medical marijuana, which depending on who you're talking to, whether that's really medical marijuana or legalizing marijuana for recreational purposes, the clear approach I will take is a science-based approach that takes a careful look at the pros and the cons, the risks and the benefits. So that is how I will approach the issue. Akin to that is hemp. And frankly, I think hemp, I'm talking about hemp used for an agricultural product. Which it has
because they've tried to kill it in Kansas, but it just grows wildly all over the place.
And one of the issues we have in Kansas is that we need to diversify our agricultural products. We grow more and more wheat and corn and beans, and we produce more and more, the bushel yield goes up and up, and the price goes down and down.
Yeah.
So we've got to look at diversification. It's not just hemp, but it's other products with
Yeah.
beans. We've got cotton coming in the south, which I think is
Yeah.
a really important thing. Canola. But there are issues there. This is another separate issue about agriculture we can come back to if you want. But back to hemp. I think we should be looking at agricultural hemp in Kansas. And there's an exemption we have to obtain. And hemp, there are different qualities of hemp, and not to grow hemp for the purposes of any hallucinogen, but for the agricultural product. I think we should look at that. And we should be also looking at opportunities for trade as well, so that the products that we grow in Kansas are agricultural products. We have to be really careful that we're not locking down, hurting ourselves with issues with restricting trade. And all of those are fair game. Did that answer your question?
Oh my goodness, this guy. I'm usually one of the guys that's skeptical, and usually I'm one of them guys that you usually see, and you're like, they be like, "Did you vote?" No, I don't think my vote's gonna matter. But for this, I would vote. I would vote. I mean, I'm normally Democratic. I mean, I'm black, of course. I'm just saying, that's just a joke.
You're
but
black?
Some people say that. But just the issues that you touch, I mean, with what you just said about the hemp and the legalization, I think of all the other things it would cut from. I mean, this would probably cut a little prison cost from people, because then but then it's going to also put more strain on doctors and let people know, hey, if you're not hurt, if you're not going through this process, then you're not getting this.
A couple of things I'd like to say back to that, Derek. First of all, I appreciate your vote, your words of support. Thank you very much. If I get to the general, that will really be great for me. But I've got to get to the Republican primary. That's the vote I need to get to the Republican primary. That's the whole deal. Thank you for that opportunity just to say that. Now, the issue of incarceration, corrections, and so forth, we haven't touched on mental health, mental illness. But our way of treating mental illness now in the state of Kansas is either in emergency rooms, and sometimes we're keeping people in our emergency rooms for days because we don't have any place to place them, especially with Osawatomie shut down.
Yes.
And then the next place we're treating mental illness in Kansas is in jail or in prison. And this is really, really wrong. So we need to reverse that process. Again, that was what happened with the Brownback-Collier tax experiment, devastation to our budget. And we've got to reverse that process in Kansas as well. It is such an important topic. I wanted to just mention it tonight.
And right here in Salina, 40% of the prisoners in the Saline County Jail have mental health issues, and that's a sad story. And the vote to build a new jail went down 60-40. Because I think people are smart enough to figure out they kind of know what's going on.
They're getting tired of
it. Mental health. People that have mental health issues, it's like if they break the law, if they jaywalk, whatever they do, the then sheriff and then the current sheriff, Kokonowski, and the current, I just lost his name.
Roger Soldier.
Yeah, I had no competition. But they said that's still the case. 40% of the people in jail, mental health issues.
We need treatment. We need treatment.
Yeah, exactly right.
And prevention.
Yeah. You mentioned getting through the Republican primary. It's a crowded field, and it's probably even going to get more crowded before we get to Election Day.
Derek Schmidt, probably.
Is that an advantage or disadvantage? I mean, is it difficult to get your message out there when there's so many trees in the forest, so to speak?
It's a disadvantage. I can tell you that if the election were held today, it is my opinion that Chris Kobach would win the election today.
Probably strictly because of name recognition at this point.
Name recognition is significant, although he has very high unfavorabilities as well. But there's a certain base that is there that just doesn't shake. So take 100% of the vote, divide it by 5. That's 20%. And so if you had that base, so that's the issue. So you have to separate me from all of them, what we've talked about tonight. That's the only way, and the more that come in, the more it is a gift really to Chris Kobach, really, in my opinion. Thank you.
Well, and Todd's right. There is a complicated field of people that are trying to get this nomination. How do you separate, I guess, kind of what Gary was saying earlier? Because there's a lot of these folks that they're like Brownback light, I've heard on so many occasions, where people are like, oh, well, Kobach's got his downsides, but there's a few people that have said that, well, Wink is just like Brownback. And it's like, if most of the state didn't like Brownback, why would they why would they go vote? How do you separate yourself and get people? Because especially in Kansas, it seems, and I'm going to insult Kansas voters at this point, but it seems like they see that there's an R next to the name, and they're like, well, I don't like Brownback, I don't like Republicans. It's like, well, you're running as a Republican, but everything you've said tonight, we all like, and I know that most of our audience would like. So it's like, how do you separate that and go to?
Again, going back to the basic, I'll work with anybody. I don't care what your party affiliation.
Yes.
I just want people to work with.
Yeah.
But I'm in a Republican primary. I've been a lifelong Republican, and I'm proud of that fact.
I think will help.
But
Because I think there's a couple people that have just become Republicans just because it's
Thing to do.
the thing to do.
But how do I separate myself is a really
Yeah.
important question. And if you look at Kobach, Collier, Seltzer, and Hartman, they're all Brownback-like.
They are.
That's the
Yep.
separation. I am not Brownback-like.
Yep.
I support those that overrode the veto for the tax experiment. I support those that voted to override the Medicaid expansion veto as well.
Yep.
I am not
was a big deal.
Brownback-like. They are Brownback-like. That's the separation.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up here, I want to start with Gary. Going into this evening, what were your thoughts and ideas? And after you've listened to the doctor talk, what are your thoughts and ideas?
Well, I follow. I think I'm among the 5% that pay attention to the issues, and I followed you since 2006, and you were my choice then, and you're my choice for sure to emerge from the Republican primary. Pretty simple for me.
Well, Derek, listening to all this, what are you made of?
I was
This
not
evening.
a part of the 5% that was aware of everything. I knew of some things,
Yeah.
but I wasn't clear on the issues. I will be upfront and honest with that. But me and him had a talk before, and the way he approached himself, I came into it good. I really didn't know what to think because I was Republican, but after hearing your whole intake, you're not like the Republican, the standard, and I found this exhilarating. I mean,
Good for you.
this was
That's a good word.
This was definitely this was something that definitely changed my mind. It makes me want to go out and do voting and things like that and pay more attention because there's a lot of issues that you address and you have a plan of action. So kudos.
Appreciate
There
it.
you go.
Yeah.
Sweet. That's good. That's good.
Now, Todd, listening to all this and listening to the doctor's comments and everything, what's your sense of this evening?
I think everything's going well. I appreciate you being as open as you are, and you're easily accessible, which I can't say for all of the other candidates out there. It's sometimes they don't return calls. It's difficult to get hold of one. I appreciate that. I would just ask you, what's your schedule here for the next? If I want to see you out somewhere, if I want to see you speak, how can I do that? What's your schedule here for the near future?
Sure. First of all, we post our schedule on, guess what, Facebook.
Right. All right.
But tonight, we are going to spend the night here in Salina because
right.
tomorrow I'm going to be down in Wichita meeting with a number of individuals that are very concerned about healthcare and education. So we'll be down in Wichita. We'll also be in Newton tomorrow. And Newton is a noontime meeting at Norm's Coffee Shop, which is a coffee bar. I already know we have a nice crowd coming, but we're going to discuss Medicaid expansion and healthcare access at that time. The following week, I'm scheduled for visits in McPherson and Hutchinson and Lindsborg.
I'm going to the one in Hutchinson. I'm going.
Oh, super! Yeah, please do. And we're scheduling then another tour. We're going to switch to a different topic next month, and it's economic development. I would love to come back and speak about economic development because I I have so many
That'd be
things
good.
to share about that.
Well, if there's somebody out there that has a group and would like maybe you to speak at, can they reach out to you?
Absolutely. So
Either
please
way.
go to barnettforkansas.com. We have the phone, the email, the Facebook, and reach out because we're excited. Rosie, by the way, I'm getting married in September. Rosie Hanson.
Congratulations, or my condolences, I'm not sure
Oh,
which.
yes, congratulations. This is what I'm really pumped about. This
That's
is
neat.
the exciting thing of our life, and I could talk on and on about this, but Rosie Hanson is just wonderful. We grew up 17 miles apart on little farms near Emporia, and somewhere in the middle there's a little love story, so that
Sweet.
we're getting married. But anyway, she was just had somebody call from Anthony, Kansas,
Right.
down below Wichita, and inviting us to come to speak September 1st on whatever's of interest. But they have 2 hospitals that are merging, and they're concerned, and they're working on that. So we are traveling a bunch. I can go on and on, but
Right.
we are traveling a bunch. And so I'm going to continue. I do still practice medicine, although I'm going to be tapering back, but I'm going to go in every week because I need to maintain my sanity, and my staff needs to maintain their sanity too.
And your patients need to see their doctor.
That's right.
That's right.
I've got a wonderful support staff, but we're gonna work this hard. It's going to be unconventional, as I said. I'm not out beating the bushes for money. I'm out to talk with people and listen and listen.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate
That's
you being
good.
with us this
Oh,
evening.
thanks.
This has definitely been fun, and I definitely would love to have you back when you're in the area. And I thank Gary for coming by, Mr. Schwartzendruber.
Mr. Simplicity.
Yes, that's right. And Mr. Scaife, thank you for coming on. And
Thank you for having me.
Todd, as always.
Yes, it's been fun, thank you.
It's
Thank you for
definitely
inviting me.
And thanks to the crew here at Access TV. Get more information on our website, salinatv.org. And thanks for watching Live from Salina.